Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast. So excited to be here with you again, listener. I am going to be talking today about something that can happen at any time of your parenting life, no matter what age your kids are. I see this happen with all different ages of kids. I bet you can resonate. It's probably happened to you at least once. For me personally, it has happened. I have three teenagers. I have four kids. Three of them are teenagers right now. Yes, everybody, that is true. I am living the dream. Parenting three teens. But I will tell you, it is a lot less scary than I thought it was going to be. But anyway, for me personally, this has happened with all three of my teenagers. We'll see if it happens with number four. So I did not really deal with this problem until my kids were teenagers. And it is absolutely a me problem. And sometimes when we realize something's a me problem, that feels bad. It's like, oh, great. Like I'm the problem. But I actually really encourage you to work on shifting your perspective on that one. I know that it's helped me a ton is to realize like when it's a me problem, that means I can fix it. Like I don't need anybody else to get in line. I don't need anything to change. All I need to do is work on myself. Like I am solely in power here. So it's a me problem. So if you have this problem, guess what? You have absolutely nothing standing between you and fixing it because it's just you. So this problem is what I call being thirsty. So, with every single one of my teenagers, as they became a teenager, I would say right around their freshman year of high school, but could be a little later, could be a little sooner. There's definitely a chapter of my life with my teenagers where I was thirsty, literally. Like I literally was just so desperate for their attention, for them to be nice to me, for them to be acknowledging me, not necessarily even thanking me, but just like literally acknowledging my existence, recognizing me, any of that stuff. And because I was so thirsty, I wound up being super soft. I would say I was a huge pushover with each of them. And my husband would call me out every time and I'd be like, "You just don't know. Like it's because I really get our kid and that's why I'm like I just really understand them and I know, exactly where they're coming from and what they need and all this stuff. And so that's why, I'm not getting upset with them as much. That is not why. It was because I was totally thirsty. And I'll give you an example with each of our kids on this. Like, okay, so for example, River, he's 17 now, but this happened a few years ago. His chore or one of his chores at the time was taking out the trash. Or no, it was emptying the dishwasher. And he would not do it unless we asked him like two or three times. And my husband was like, Mike was like, okay, hello, parent coach. You're not supposed to be reminding your kid over and over again. You're not supposed to be repeating yourself. And also like you need to be giving a consequence instead of saying this stuff over and over again. And I was a total wimp with it. And the reason why does this happen? And it happens to all of us, okay, at different times. I'm telling you, it's because our kids are emancipating. And for me personally, this is why it happened when my kids were teenagers. And it's not the same for every parent. So, for depending on like how well, comfortable you are with yourself, comfortable with your kids' negative emotions, all these little metrics that you've heard me talk about a million times, like you might not really mind it at all if your kid is upset with you for most of their childhood. Like whatever, kids get upset. That's a them problem, not a me problem, right? But once our kids get to be teenagers, it is well and appropriate and healthy for them to really be in that emancipation journey big time, meaning, they basically don't hold you in such high regard the way that they did when they were younger, and they're not supposed to. But because it's kind of like they don't care, you know, they don't need you anymore. They don't really care if they spend time with you. They don't really care if you're around or not. They don't care if you're mad at them even sometimes. That is what triggered my thirstiness. So, I would totally just, I was so kind of like desperate. I was completely like how I was when I was a little teenage girl in high school, having a crush on somebody who didn't, even know I existed. And the less that they, paid attention to me, the more I was like, desperate, desperate to be noticed, to have any sort of like positive anything from them, for them to smile at me or say hi to me or whatever. You know how it is when you're in when you're in this dynamic where it's like I like you more than you like me. That is a completely the vibe that I experience when my kids become teenagers. And I think it's super common for a ton of parents. And as soon as it's like, wait a minute, I like you more than you like me, all of a sudden we are just so thirsty. And the problem with this, we can all joke about it and everything. And if you are a parent of a teenager, I know you know what I'm talking about. It's like, I'm just desperate for you to not roll your eyes just one time in front of me, or for you to not, just go directly to your room and hole up in there and not even give me the time of day, for you to be happy around me. Like all of the things that it just become so much less common and less frequent when our kids are teenagers. We get so desperate for it. The problem with thirsty parenting is that we don't hold boundaries. And you guys have heard me talk about this many, many times in different ways. Authoritative parenting, this is like the gold standard. It is the North Star that we are all shooting for in parenting. And authoritative parenting can only happen when we are giving our kids two things. And at this point, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I bet you can recite them with me. The first thing is emotional attunement. That's that close connection. That's what I do really well with my teenagers is I get it. I love them. I'm super able to stay neutral and attuned to them and connected to them and compassionate to them, even while they're going through all of their emotional roller coaster stuff. And it keeps me like this emotional safe space for them. So that's that first metric. But the second metric is being in a leadership role, holding boundaries, being in control. Children thrive best when they receive both of those things. When they receive from their parents control and leadership, plus emotional attunement and connection. And if we're not giving our kids both, we're not doing right by our kids. And for me, as soon as I have those thirsty vibes, I suck at being the controlling, manager of our family, holding boundaries and giving consequences. I acquiesce on that. I relax on that area because it's so profoundly important to me to maintain that connection and stay that emotional safe space. And I fall into a lie, a trap. We fall into this trap all of the time, especially when we're in that thirsty place, when our kids are kind of like, mom, who, whatever, I roll. When our kids are in that vibe, it's easy to believe this lie, which is if I hold a boundary, if I enforce a consequence, if I do stuff that my kid is going to be upset about, I will sacrifice that connection and that attunement with my child. That is not true. It's not true. And for a lot of my clients, that's a leap of faith that we have to take. It's really hard for me to quote unquote prove it to you that by holding boundaries and giving consequences to your child, you're actually creating a ton of space for connection and attunement. That doesn't compute to a lot of us. For a lot of us, those two metrics that make up authoritative parenting feel like an either or. I can either be close, I can either be connected, I can either be an emotional space, safe space for my child, or I can be the disciplinarian and hold boundaries and give consequences. This is why authoritative parenting is such a brain breaker for so many of us, because it's not the way that we were parented. It's not what we experience growing up, and it's not what we've seen modeled for us. And it's probably not what we've even seen in the world around us. And so all of a sudden, we're really holding ourselves to a standard that's like, it's kind of foreign territory. And so, our ability, and I will tell you this is true for everybody, our ability to actually deliver on both of those things is completely determined by our level of groundedness, our level of emotional regulation, our level of feeling safe and secure and okay in ourselves, our level of security and emotional wellness. And this thirsty stuff is such a great example of that, because as soon as we start feeling thirsty, as soon as we become thirsty parents, our level of groundedness, security, feeling safe and secure in ourselves, feeling okay about ourselves, like literally our self esteem even goes down. We're in this like desperate, like, notice me, pick me. I become like a pick me girl with my kids. It's so lame, but it's true. Once you're in that vibe, desperation, pick me vibes are not a sign of emotional regulation, emotional security, emotional wellness. So, of course, you're going to slide down in both of those arenas. And even that emotional attunement arena, which I think, when my teenagers go through this phase and then I go through my phase of thirstiness with them, I think I'm nailing it in that emotional security place. Even that, I'm not really, because the reason why I'm showing up the way that I am is to assuage my thirstiness, to quench my thirst, so to speak. It's so that I can feel that connection, that I'm, experiencing that loss. I'm experiencing that distance between me and my child, which is actually healthy and appropriate. I don't like it. Feels kind of sad. It's a little bit of a grieving process. It's a little growing pains. And those growing pains make me show up in my connection with my kids in a way that's really about for me. It's not for them, it's for me, so that I don't feel so sad about our, you know, separation, our increasing separation. And I'm also not nailing it in the boundaries department, because I'm afraid that if I hold boundaries and do things that I know my kids are going to be angry about, I'm going to be losing them even more. So, my advice to you today is, if you see yourself in this, well, first of all, it takes one to know one. Like, I get it. I'm right there with you. Here I am, parent coach, quote unquote extraordinaire, totally falling into this like pick me mindset when it comes to that like initial kind of transition into emancipated teenage time. For me, that's when I experience that. I experience that separation. It makes me thirsty. And it makes me really kind of slide down my healthiness in parenting in both those arenas. So if you recognize yourself in that, I hear you, I see you, I get you. You're not alone. And what we really need to do is, well, first of all, you can boil this down into basically like, stop being so thirsty. Like, come on now. No one wants to be around a pick me girl. No one wants to be in those kind of like thirsty vibes, right? Like when we're like kind of like desperate and like grabbing at our kids to give them kisses and they're like pulling away from us and all that stuff, right? So, we have to stop. And the way for me that I stop is, well, first of all, to remember that I'm not actually giving my kids what they deserve. My thirstiness is actually a me problem. It's my job to recognize why I feel the way that I do, to process those feelings, and to hold myself to the standard that never changes, no matter how hard it is or no matter what age my child is. Authoritative parenting is what I hold myself to. And I don't nail it all the time, and that's not a problem. But when I realize that I'm kind of like in this literal phase of not nailing it and not hitting the mark, that's when I need to look at myself, remind myself not to be so thirsty, remind myself that this is normal and natural, that holding boundaries actually creates closeness, and that I can do so in a loving way that isn't about, softening the blow, which is another thing I do when I'm a thirsty parent. Try to, cushion the blow, or, maybe give a lesser consequence or whatever. But that's not necessary. Like that's kind of the whole point of all of this. Like all of that stuff that you think you're kind of assuaging your sadness or your worries or your concerns or your anxieties about what's going to happen if I hold this boundary. All of those things aren't actually how relationships work. That's not really how it works. When we hold boundaries, we do create closeness. When we allow our kids to own their emotions, and when we hold ourselves accountable, to own our own emotions, we create more closeness. There's a really great saying that I've heard from several therapists over the years, and it's so true, which is when someone creates boundaries or holds boundaries with you, it's because they want to keep you in their life. Boundaries create closeness. When you create a boundary with your child, you are not pushing them away. You are creating the space and container inside of which closeness is possible. So please give yourself permission not to be thirsty parent. Recognize this as a normal phenomenon. It might not be for you when your kids are teenagers. I work with clients all the time who have this exact same, heartache around holding boundaries with their toddlers or their school age kids. This does not have to be a teenage thing. For me, that's when I experience it personally. That's just part of my own sort of growth as a mother and in that shifting moment in my relationship with my children. You can experience this at any time. And if that is you and you really want to learn all these, like, okay, so great. How do I emotionally tune? How do I hold boundaries? If you know that it's not enough for me to just say, stop being thirsty, you need to actually explore and work through those feelings of transition and distance and things like that with you and your child. That's what I'm here for. The podcast is just gravy on top. But if you really want to get this work going, if you want to make deep, lasting change in your family, if you want to really be laying the foundation to create an amazing, strong, rock solid parent child relationship with your kiddo, it's time for us to meet. Set up that consultation. It is free. What could you possibly be waiting for? Sit down with me. Tell me all of your concerns, your goals, your dreams for your family. What makes it hard for you to reach all of that? And I will create an amazing vision for you, a roadmap that walks you exactly from where you are right now to where you want to be. And we will figure out the best way for you to walk that roadmap to actually travel that journey. I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. Have an amazing week, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.